Now, how many of you have heard, oh, Frieren changed my life, or the classic, Frieren is the greatest anime ever because I have. Let me go ahead and tell you, I have a lot. Now, this is why I have decided to review it. For one, me. Because then I can finally tell everybody that I've watched the series, that everybody is pandering me to watch, and two, to tell everybody on the internet why I'm right and why I'm the only right one. Obviously. Of course, that is what I do here. Now, without further ado, if you think I need to do something different, if you think my review is bad, if you think it's good, or if you just have a fun comment you want to leave below, please do so. And be sure to subscribe, like the video, show me that you enjoy this content, because otherwise I will be flying into the void of series and who knows when I'll ever stop. So, without further ado, let's get into the beginning. Now, I believe that Frieren's beginning is one of exceptional depth and boredom, and within my 3-point scale that I do for the beginning, which 1 point is premise, 1 point is the main character, are they interesting, and the 3rd point is the hook, it's a little bit of a mixed bag to say the very least. I think the idea of a fantasy series that has already dealt with the Demon King is interesting, so you get the premise point, but Frieren is much like a bag of ramen, right? On her own, she is tasty, some would say, but she needs more ingredients, specifically the ingredients named Fern and Stark, to be incredibly interesting, because she's more of a character that bounces off of other people rather than being super story heavy on their own, because to be fair, her journey has already ended, her main one, with her other party to fight the Demon King. So, you can't really expect too much from her, and that's why I don't believe she gets the interest point, and as a result, the hook point is a lot harder to get, because I really rely on my main character to be interesting to hook me into the series, because I'm more of a character writing guy. But also another point is the world building is very stock standard medieval fantasy, and that didn't really get me too crazy into it either, so I believe it loses the hook point as well and gets a 1 out of 3 for the beginning. Tragic, but we move on because I like to review things critically, so I just went on anyways. Now, as for characters, we're going to start off with the main character, Frieren. I mean, she gets way better with time. It's actually shocking. I think it's mostly to do with her party members and them kind of growing with her and her growing as a result. Mainly because she learns to value time because of Fern. And I do believe that's something that should be said in her favor. I think she is incredibly gifted in the magic and power department. I think everybody can understand that, right? She freaking demolishes anything she comes across. However, mentally, emotionally, she's a lot less developed, to say the very least. She kind of needs more help in those areas, and that's why Fern and Stark are very funny as party members for her to have, because for lack of a better way, they're essentially her children, and she kind of just babysits them, which I find admittedly hilarious. Also, she's very a mechanically gifted character, not in the sense of, like, I'm the main character that's going to carry the entire story on my back, more so that she knows when to jump into the spotlight and when to leave, right? She does this a lot in Sign's story, where she knows when to come in, but she also knows when to let Sign have his time in the limelight to get character development his own way. Also, I believe that her reactions, like the memeable faces obviously, are just fun. They're as much fun for me as they are for the characters in the story, especially the mimic thing. I don't know why I didn't get sick. I honestly thought I was going to get sick of it after like the 5th time they did it, but I still enjoyed it because I thought it was funny. So I think without further ado, she gets the 2 out of 2 points. Easy. We're going on. Now, as for Antagonist, a very slippy slope. And this is due to a number of factors, but I believe 1 is expectations and 2 is tension. So we'll go with expectations first, right? So due to the kind of episodic nature, right? They're going along the quest and they stop at towns and they do kind of side questy stuff, right? Episodic. But there is still the overarching plot point of like getting to the heaven place, right? And so she can talk with her old party members and stuff like that. Now, that is both good and bad, because you would expect, oh, there's going to be some villain of the week type people. Maybe not every village, but like maybe every other or something like that. And then there's going to be like one big bad or something at the end goal. or one big bad organization. That doesn't really happen because the Demon King's already dead. And his remnants put up a decent fight, but it's hardly noteworthy because one, Frieren is there, so she just obliterates them, and two, they're rather one note. So they kind of come off in the beginning with the idea that, oh, maybe they're good now because they realize that after their king's dead, they're going to have to adjust to society, and it would be interesting to see them trying to adjust, but society's not going to accept them and them having to deal with that. That would have been an interesting way to put it. But they're just bad for being bad villains, which is fine if you do it in an interesting way, which the series really doesn't. They're just kind of demons. Nothing special about it. They're just kind of, they're not even very eccentric design-wise or personality-wise. They're not very unique. They kind of just look like how they look. And to me, that makes them fall very flat. So, there. And also, some are going to argue that the story doesn't need antagonists, and I would say that it really does. Obviously, Frieren doesn't really need to prove herself, but Fern and Stark kind of do, as this is their once-in-a-lifetime journey, and they need to have antagonists that are going to challenge them and their values to develop, right? Because they are seen within the story and by Frieren as children, right? They need to grow within the story, and they need, you know, opposite forces to do that, and antagonist is the main way you're going to do such a thing, right? It doesn't really work out. And the reason that antagonists can't really interact with Fern and Stark in the same way that they usually could is because either the antagonist is going to have to catch Frieren completely off guard, which is something that the audience knows is really not going to happen, because they would have to outmaneuver her in such a way that we've seen as impossible time and time again, or they're going to have to be stronger than Frieren, which is even more questionable considering the Demon King existed, and it took the entire party to kill him. And so he was probably the only one even close, because we know, like, the sages or whatever aren't, obviously, because Frieren donks that person very easily. So I believe overall it wouldn't be a very realistic challenge, and it would seem rather forced if they did try to go that route, which I'm glad they didn't, but still the lack thereof will garner you the 1 out of 2 points for antagonist. Now, as for side characters, they are top tier. I don't care what anybody says. Past party, present party, villager characters, the mages in the wizard arc thing, all of the character writing is super tight, and this is very easy to see with Frieren and her interactions with each one, because they're all unique in very different ways, and they show their values both personally and specifically within time, because time is a main focus of the series, so it's very interesting to watch that all come into effect. And you can see Fern and Stark's relation, or not Fern and Stark, but Fern and Stark to Frieren, right? So their relationship with her, the easiest, because even though they're both brought to her with essentially the same background as a apprentice, or they're close with a certain party member that was with Frieren and now they're taken under her wing, they have very different levels of closeness with her, even though they're both super close. So it's very interesting character writing. The dialogue is super tight, and I love it with side characters. Also, quick side note, thank God they made the characters actually smart with decision making and plans. Like, I can't tell you the amount of times I see a series like this and they have very neat characters, but they make stupid decisions time and time after again, so you can never really, like, trust them. But this series does great with its dialogue, decision-making, stuff of that nature. And for a more low-to-the-ground, power scale-wise series, except for Frieren, obviously, like this series really is trying to be at its core, I believe it's masterfully done with its side characters. I think it's the easy 3 out of 2, especially because Fern and Stark exist alone, right? And you could even talk about Sign, which I think is another great character. Now, we're going to get onto the story, right? I would say the story is slow to start. Obviously, I think it takes about 6 episodes for you to really get into it, but I would say it's definitely unique. It's sort of afterward story that focuses on what time can mean to people. So from like how to spend it well to understanding its value, it does an exceptional job at presenting a very important life lesson in an interesting way and a digestible way, because it could be interesting, but if the audience is not understanding the lesson and kind of the values you're playing around with, then you're talking to essentially nobody the entire time if it's not digestible. So this is mainly accomplished, obviously, because Frieren is an elf and she has a longer lifespan, so you kind of get to use her as a base, and then human and like dwarf, or well, really it would be dwarf and then human, but depending on their lifespan, their values on time and relationships and how to spend it well. It's very fascinating to dissect because it plays a lot into their character values. Now, an even more interesting part, like I hinted at earlier, I believe, is that the series will go ahead and tell you when Frieren is wrong. It will just straight up tell you. Like, Fern has a conversation about how she can't spend a certain amount of time on this side quest, essentially, because she's a human. She doesn't have as long of a lifespan as Frieren. Frieren realizes that she no longer has to value just her own time, but the time of the people she cares about, mainly because of Himmel, right? Because she didn't spend enough time with him. He's a human. He died. She didn't get to know him as well as she wanted to. Therefore, when Fern makes that comment, she realizes it and understands that she needs to value time at a way more fast-paced level compared to what she's used to. So I think that's very interesting. It also allows her to learn basic time management skills, which she clearly does not have because, my God, she sleeps in for an ungodly amount of time every single day. Now, I do understand all the great points, right, within the story, but I'm going to talk about some stuff that it struggles with. Mainly tension and interest, like I brought up before, with antagonists. Ugh. And to be completely honest, not every person is as crazy of an anime fan as I am, right? They're not going to dissect the story and watch it even if it starts to lose their interest just because they love to critically look at things. Most people just want to be entertained at the end of the day. So I believe how the story is set up with the Demon King dead and Frieren so strong that very few, if any, characters can even interact with her, creates essentially a black hole that sucks away all tension from the series that could possibly develop, and thus your interest in this series will considerably fade as well. So I believe it has that problem, and mainly I don't know how they're going to fix it, because most stories that end or have a overpowered main character I don't end up enjoying, but I did really enjoy Frieren, so I'm very curious as to how they fix this issue, but I do believe it's still a very big issue they will need to look at. So with that being said, oh, also, quick side note, I am so sad that Sign left, the priest guy that they got. We worked so hard for like an episode or two just to get him onto the party, and then he leaves later, which just made me feel exceptionally cheated as a result, just being an audience member. I don't know if anybody else was the same way, but my God, I love this man. He reminded me a lot of Sanji from One Piece. Maybe that's why I loved him, because he was like the smoker character, the corrupt priest like hider, so I already liked him. And he was just so cool. And he also kind of mediated the fights between Stark and Fern in interesting ways. And I understand that kind of sidelined Frieren a bit from that role, but I honestly believe they were doing interesting things with her and her conversations with Sign during that time that I thought it made up for it, but maybe I was wrong. Also, I guess maybe it would make Frieren so overpowered because if they had a priest on the team, then if she ever got injured, Sign could just heal her automatically. And then the tension that is already essentially not there would definitely not be there. She could keep getting, like, rezzed on death. But I still believe that the pursuit of heaven is an interesting enough goal to not be completely destroyed by the lack of tension. And by pursuit of heaven, I mean the land that they're trying to go to at the end of the series. I don't remember its name. I'll put it up on screen, but I do think that is a very fascinating idea. So I'm going to give the story a 3 out of 4. I believe you can work on some stuff, mainly in the tension department, but once you have that knocked out, golden. That's all I'll say. Now, as for world building, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Frieren is essentially just a medieval fantasy, right? If you want to talk about like an isekai, they do this all the time, the exact same setting. If you want to talk about just fantasy anime, they do this all the time, exact same setting. So I'm not going to say it's bad. It's a very popular genre and people obviously super like it. But to me, it's just a generic fantasy world and it's kind of boring from the onset. Granted, they build on top of this with some stuff like the end goal of the heaven place and the magic exams, which I think were so interesting. And I'm going to get off on this tangent for a second. Did anybody else get Hunter x Hunter vibes from the magic exam? Like, I definitely got Hunter x Hunter vibes. Like, the entire first section they do reminded me so much of the island thing that Hunter x Hunter does in the exams. Because it was essentially you have to catch a bird instead of getting the other person's number. But teams kind of formed on that as well. And it was interesting to see some people just try to kill each other from the start. And then some people to kind of manipulate the battle area in such a way. It was neat, and I like that. And also the labyrinth thing felt very much out of Hunter x Hunter as well, with like the prison stuff. I don't know if I was the only one, and this is not to say like Frieren copied Hunter x Hunter and therefore it's bad. No, I loved it. I thought it was so cool. But I mean, I was just curious if anybody else felt the same way. So those ideas definitely do cement the series as something with its own, right? So it's not just a generic fantasy world, which I definitely appreciate because sometimes people just don't even do the bare minimum like that. And also to say that I believe sometimes the magic are pretty neat. Like the clone guy, I thought he was so cool. The fact that he was at his house the entire time and only the super powerful mage elf girl noticed it was such a power play. I was bamboozled. I don't know if anybody else was bamboozled, but I was freaking blown away. And then the green-haired girl, which I don't remember her name, but I like just a simple power like hers, where it can cut anything that she can like visualize cutting. It reminded me a lot of, what's his name, Zaraki from Bleach, if anybody knows him, where I think it's his Bankai, where he can just like slice anything and that's his power. So I like that. I thought it was cool. And overall, I think it's very neat. Oh, also, one last thing to say. I think the interconnectedness between the world, viewing it from the past and viewing it from the present, is definitely something that should not be overlooked. It is very fascinating to watch her reminisce about her time in the party with Himmel, Heiter, and all of them, and to kind of see how it plays in with her current party is very fascinating from a world building perspective, as well as a character writing one. So I believe overall I give the world building a 3 out of 4. You can work on some stuff, but you're headed in the right direction, especially by the end of the series. It's just the first like 6 episodes, first half really, until the Hunter x Hunter-esque magic exam was very stale from a world building perspective. So that brings us to the ending, right? I think the ending with the magic exam, with Frieren getting the first-rate mage, beautiful send-off to the series. She is making both her master Frieren and Heiter very proud. And as for Stark, he's constantly improving as he grows both in power and in confidence. And as for Frieren, she is happy to continue her journey, right, at the end, to expand her collection of grimoires, and, of course, to make more unforgettable memories with the party of new companions that she currently has. And that's why I will give this ending a wonderful 3 out of 3. Now, for the beginning, that gives us 1 point, alright? All the character points totaled, that makes it 7. As for the story, that makes it 10. And world building puts it to 13. So finally we end with a 16 out of 20. Now, I will say to anybody who's like, oh my god, he rated it essentially, like a 0.8, right? That's not to say it's bad. That is far from saying it's bad. I'm saying it's very exceptional and a great job. And the people who worked on this should be proud. The author should be proud. I just believe that it has some things to work on. And once it fixes those things, it will be perfectly fine. I believe it will truly transcend the fantasy genre in a way that we haven't seen in anime ever. And that's 100% what I believe. I just believe that, my god, the beginning is a rocky road. Whew! Those first 6-ish episodes, or maybe it's 7, I can't really remember. They're rough. They're rough, I won't lie. And some other things in there were kind of questionable, like the fight at the very end with Frieren and the old mage guy was odd too, but I didn't really question it as much as other things. So, I will see you in the next one. And as for the ending, or the opening, because I remembered this time, I think it's a pretty gosh darn good banger. Adios.